What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about ESPN. Now, this was a difficult video to navigate and to prepare for because looking at the default settings for ESPN, they are terrible. For some reason, in the default points leagues, blocks are worth half an assist, and in the default category leagues, it counts penalty minutes, time on ice, and plus minus. Like, what are we doing here? There's also three ways to sort when you go into a draft. One is by their expert ranking, which is always fun to look at. Another is average draft position, and also the projected fantasy points based on ESPN's projections. Sorting by projections is probably the best thing to do. It's still not very good though. Some projections on here don't make any sense. Like, they have Stamkos projected above a lot of really good players, but at least it's better than ADP and expert rank. I think it's hilarious to have an expert ranking when your default category leagues and also points leagues are so different. And I mean, looking at the expert ranking here, Matt Coronado is the 50th best player according to these expert rankings. So that's interesting. You know, I saw this and I thought to myself, okay, maybe Matt Coronado has elite blocks or something. Maybe he has elite peripherals. Maybe I'm missing something. To my memory, he's not that type of player, but yeah, I checked and he isn't that type of player. There's no reason why he should be 50th in the rankings ahead of Mitch Marner. Yeah, you heard that right. Coronado is ranked ahead of Mitch Marner. He's also ranked ahead against Jesper Bratt. I feel like I don't even need to go on here. The fact that he's ahead of Mitch Marner is pretty much everything that you need to know. What's crazy is that when you go to draft, it's automatically sorted by expert ranking. So you're going to see Matt Coronado up there with a bunch of other players that shouldn't be very high. And, you know, normally you could just go sort by ADP and get a better idea of which players are valuable. But even ADP is crazy too. Like, maybe it's the bots that have been drafting or whatever, but Matt Coronado's ADP is still super high and it makes no sense. That's obviously one thing, but we know that using sort of any expert rankings and looking at ADP is not really going to help you because it's not reflective of your league settings. Like I said in some previous videos, the best thing that you're going to need to do is use a projection tool. I've recommended Fantrax to you guys. If you want to sign up on there, it's free. You can just input your league settings, whether it's a points or a category league. And then for points leagues, you can look at total fantasy points and fantasy points per game. For a category league, you get a score. So you can look at the projections for this year. And you can also look at previous seasons as well, which I like to do just to gain some insight on which players have had more value than others according to my own league settings. That's one option, but you guys could also use projection tools like Apples and Genos, Don from The Athletic. I think those are both paid, but Fresh Sheets, Scott Kellen's projections, you can find that on the Fantasy Hockey Reddit. That is free, and you'll be able to input your league settings and see the projections for that. With all that being said, some of you may be using these default settings, and I want to point out to you the best and worst values. So let's start it off with points leagues. Also, one last very important thing before we talk about this is that I know some of you are in ESPN leagues with left wing, right wing, and center, but we're only going to be talking about the forward designation. This is because when you make a new ESPN league, whether it's category or points leagues, the default settings are only forwards, defensemen, and goalies. There's no positions. And when looking at ADP, I don't see the position. So yeah, I'm not going to talk about it. I'm sorry if you guys have those designations. I also hear that the positional eligibility on ESPN is terrible as well. So yeah, it's a little complicated. So yeah, we're only going to be talking about forwards. No left wing, no right wing, no center. Let's start off with goalies to get that out of the way. As you guys can see, wins are 4, goals against are -2, saves are 0.2, shutouts are 3, and overtime losses are 1. I made a goalie video going over this, so I'll keep this short, but essentially in these ESPN default points leagues, goalies on bad teams are heavily punished. I'm really not a big fan of these settings, but it is what it is. A lot of you guys are using them, and essentially what you're going to want to do is get goalies on good teams. It's pretty simple. In terms of ADP value, Anthony Stolarz is up there, 10th goalie off the board. He was really good last year despite not playing a lot of games just because his numbers were so good. You also have Joseph Woll being out, who knows for how long, so that's going to give him even more volume. Some other goalies here, Ilya Sorokin, just good value in my opinion. Logan Thompson, good value. Mackenzie Blackwood, amazing value. I know he's injured, but 15th goalie off the board for a goalie that had really good numbers last year and should rack up a lot of wins. It's a no-brainer. Also, Jacob Markstrom, another insane value to me. 21st goalie off the board makes no sense. Linus Ullmark is solid too. I like like the Travis Green defensive system. He's a good goalie. And then Karel Vejmelka might be a little bit risky, but he is on a team that could make the playoffs and you're getting him for free. So yeah, a little bit risky, but I do think he's worth the price. Then for the worst goalies, Destin Wolf. I think Wolf's fine, but I just think this is too pricey. Like Mackenzie Blackwood is going what, like 80, 90 picks later? Let me check. He's going 80 picks later. Makes no sense. It's just too pricey for me. Joey Decord, just too pricey for a team that's not very good. Sam Montembeault. Montembeault is going to have some really bad weeks and cost you. UC Saros, same thing. The Preds also just lost one of their defensemen for like 6 to 8 weeks. That's not going to help Saros, so I'm concerned about Saros right now. The other two goalies here are Charlie Lindgren. I just think it's too pricey. I don't think he's going to see as many games this season. And then with Tristan Jarry, I don't think I need to tell you guys why you shouldn't draft Tristan Jarry with these settings. Yeah, it's sort of a no-brainer. This could also be left without being said, but you don't want the Spencer Knights or the Yaroslav Askarovs. Any of those goalies on those bottom of the barrel teams are going to cost you quite a bit. Moving on to the players, we're going to break it down between forwards and defensemen because there is such a huge difference between the two with these blocks being so heavily weighted. It's so ridiculous, guys. 0.5 for blocks. As you guys can see here are the settings: 2 for goals, 1 for assists, 0.5 for power play points and shorthanded points, 0.1 for shots on goal and hits, and then blocks 0.5. I get sort of the reasoning behind this initially, wanting to give more weight to blocks to give value to defensemen over forwards. But the problem with only doing this with blocks is that certain players are going to show up way higher than they should be. For example, Alexander Romanov basically had the same amount of fantasy points per game as Adam Fox last season. He had way more blocks and he had some hits as well too. But yeah, the blocks is really what caused this. I don't think that's how fantasy should be played, but it is what it is. And I mean, another example would be Alex Tuck. Tuck had like 110 blocks last year, most among forwards, I think. And he averaged more fantasy points per game than Mitch Marner, who put up 100 plus points. The good thing is that this is going to be easy to exploit. Not so much with the forwards, because if you look at some of these forwards, how many blocks they get in a year, it varies quite a bit, but more so with the defensemen. I do want to talk about the forwards first though, and sort of just give you the best and worst value. We're going to be talking about league settings a bit in this because yes, it influences this, but in general, some of these ADPs are pretty bad. So let's start with forwards. The first best value is Kirill Kaprizov. He should be going above Nylander, Forsberg, Brady Tkachuk, and also David Pastrnak as well. So yeah, that doesn't make much sense. I also think Jack Hughes, Jack Eichel, Mitch Marner, Matt Boldy, Jesper Bratt, Sebastian Aho, Seth Jarvis, all going too late. Seth Jarvis specifically because he has those peripherals, and I think he could put up 30 goals and 75 points. I just think that's good value here, but most of these players are just going too late in general. In terms of the worst value, William Nylander, not terrible, but he shouldn't be going ahead of Kirill Kaprizov, Jack Hughes, Jack Eichel, maybe even Mitch Marner. I know goals are more heavily weighted in this, but yeah, it's just way too pricey for me. Mikko Rantanen, same sort of reasoning. Macklin Celebrini, why is Celebrini going ahead of Jack Eichel? What are we doing here? Cole Caulfield, why is Cole Caulfield going 36 picks earlier than Matt Boldy? Alex Ovechkin, Tim Stützle, Steven Stamkos. Why is Steven Stamkos' ADP 42.4? What are we doing? Kirill Marchenko, I'm a big fan, but 44.9, 22 picks ahead of Matt Boldy, 30 picks ahead of Jesper Bratt. You know, guys like Aho and Jarvis going way later. Brandon Hagel, just not the biggest fan. I've talked about this in videos. Connor Bedard, I think there's better value later. Adam Fantilli, 74.1, going ahead, 1 pick ahead of Sebastian Aho, 1 pick ahead of Jesper Bratt. I like Fantilli, but this guy's not even power play 1. So yeah, there's some really glaring, obvious bad ADPs, Stamkos and Fantilli, and we'll get to the worst one here, Matt Coronado. I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm really doing some investigative journalism here, trying to search for the reasoning behind Coronado's ADP being this high. I haven't figured it out yet. Let me know in the comments below. But yeah, Coronado going ahead of some elite players. What is ESPN, man? What is ESPN? For the rest here, Nico Hischier, good value, you know, point per game potential, good blocks as well. Alex Tuck is on here just because of the blocks. Like I said, he averaged more fantasy points per game than Mitch Marner. Massive edge. Same thing with Raquel and Joel Eriksson Ek. They have those blocks. That gives them a huge edge. They also have hits, right? Hits are the same value as shots in this format, so hits will matter as well. Tomas Hertl, he has good peripherals and it's solid value. he can score goals too. You want to find guys that can score goals. Robert Thomas, I know he doesn't score the most goals, but this is pretty egregious. But yeah, it just doesn't make sense. A point per game player going 70 picks later than Matt Coronado. Nikolai Ehlers, same thing. Could be a point per game player, just good value. Sam Bennett has those peripherals, those hits, those blocks, going super late. Brian Rust has those peripherals and has those goals and is always solid. Andrei Svechnikov has the hits, has the shots, power play 1. Matthew Tkachuk shouldn't be going this late. I'm not sure how ESPN works in terms of IR and IR plus, but I'm assuming you could throw somebody on the IR and this guy could pay off as a league winner. So if you can grab him this late, that feels pretty good. The worst value is Nazem Kadri, 78.5. You know, why is Kadri going 60 picks earlier than Robert Thomas? Matvei Michkov just going too high with some of the value later here. Pavel Dorofeev, I just think he's going too high. I do like him on certain platforms like Yahoo where shots are heavily valued, but they're not heavily valued here. So Brock Nelson, too pricey. Logan Cooley, too pricey. Logan Cooley's peripherals are very bad. No hits, lack of blocks, not even power play 1 in camp as well, which is concerning. Brad Marchand, too pricey. Alex Laferriere. Chris Kreider, same sort of reasoning with Alex Laferriere. JJ Peterka, and also Will Kool-Aid. Again, hits matter somewhat in this, but not enough to have him over players like Brian Rust and Andrei Svechnikov and, Nichushkin, Barzal, some of these other guys. So yeah, let's get into the next range. The rest here, Juraj Slafkovsky has those hits, has those blocks. Barzal has point potential and you're getting him super late, so it just doesn't make too much sense. Nichushkin has crazy upside, has really good peripherals. Dylan Cousins, same justification in terms of the peripherals, and he has 30 goals, 65 point potential. You also have Zach Hyman. If you can throw him on your IR, this is amazing value. Ken Johnson's good too. Mark Stone is on power play 1 in camp and has decent peripherals. Morgan Geekie has those peripherals and this is good value. Sean Monahan could be a 70-point player, getting him super late. Arturi Lehkonen could be on power play 1. They moved him back to line 1 with McKinnon. Power play 1 in practice, but I'm sure it's going to be him or Nichushkin battling it out and they're going to switch it up. Regardless, you're getting him at a pretty good price. Troy Terry, good price. Boone Jenner is going to be super underrated in this format because of his blocks. He is elite when it comes to hits and blocks as a forward, so please target Boone Jenner. And then Josh Norris is really solid as well because of those peripherals and also the fact that he's line 1 and power play 1. The worst value here is Marco Kasper. I get it, his hits are good, but it doesn't justify the ADP. Like, why is he going 30 picks earlier than Slafkovsky? Doesn't make too much sense. Like, even Svechnikov is only going 7 picks ahead of Kasper, and Svechnikov is way more goal and point upside. Matt Duchene, Dmitry Voronkov, Trevor Zegras, Mikael Granlund, and Connor Garland are also really bad value. Moving on to defensemen, this is where you're going to be able to exploit these default points league settings because of the blocks. Like I mentioned earlier, 0.5, half of an assist, pretty insane. But that means what you're going to do is find defensemen that put up a lot of blocks. That's pretty much it. If you can find players that can put up a lot of points and power play points while putting up blocks, that's sort of the fantasy unicorns when it comes to these default settings. But there's also a ton of players that might only put up like 20 points that put up a lot of blocks that show up very high in fantasy points per game according to these settings. So let's go over them. I also should mention that hits matter too, 0.1. I know it's not a crazy weighting compared to goals and assists, but it's the same as shots and it does influence things and it does give an edge to some players. So if you can find defensemen that can put up good hits and a ton of blocks, that's how you're going to win. An example that I mentioned earlier that I want to reiterate is Alexander Romanov, who only put up 20 points last season. He had the same fantasy points per game as Adam Fox. Why? Because he put up a ton of hits and a ton of blocks. But that being said, the best values here are Moritz Seider, Jake Sanderson, Mikhail Sergachev, Seth Jones, Colton Parayko, Darnell Nurse, Jake Wallman, Jacob Trouba, Caden Gooley, Travis Sanheim, Jake Middleton, Alexander Romanov, Radko Gudas, Esa Lindell, Chris Tanev, Ian Cole, Nick Seeler, Alexander Carrier, Jake McCabe, Martin Ferravari, Connor Murphy, Ryan Pulock, and Jonas Brodin. Obviously with the guys on the left side here, like Seider and Sanderson and Sergachev and Jones and Parayko, Nurse, Wallman, these guys can put up a lot of points with those blocks, and that's going to give them a huge edge. With the other players though, they don't necessarily need to put up a lot of points to show up in the top 50 or top 60 fantasy points per game among defensemen. A guy like Esa Lindell shows up in the top 50. A lot of these guys showed up in the top 60, and yet if you look at their ADP, they're going as like the 90th or 100th defenseman off the board, and that makes makes no sense. Romanov was 17th in fantasy points per game last year, according to these default league settings, and yet he is going as the 62nd defenseman off the board. That's one example. Another example would be Nick Seeler. He had the 32nd best fantasy points per game among defensemen last year, and yet he is going as the 83rd defenseman off the board. I could go on, guys. There's tons of other examples on this list, but if you have these default settings, these exact default settings with these blocks, then you want to target these defensemen. With that in mind, you want to avoid defensemen that aren't going to put up a lot of blocks. That's sort of your number one priority with these settings. If they don't have hits either, that's another disadvantage. So these would be my least favorite here. Quinn Hughes, Lane Hudson, Erik Karlsson, Mike Matheson for some reason is going super high. I know he has decent blocks, but it doesn't justify the ADP. Brock Faber, Miro Heiskanen, Gustav Forsling, Noah Hannafin, Brady Shea, Luke Hughes, and Brent Burns. There's other guys that don't put up the best blocks, but they're valued appropriately according to their ADP. These players are not, so something to keep in mind. Next, I want to talk about category leagues. I think it's useful to talk about goalies because I think a lot of people may have the category settings, the default settings, wins, goals against average, and save percentage. But I sort of struggle with looking at the forwards and defensemen because these are the default settings. You have goals, assists, pretty normal, plus minus, hate it, but I get it. Some leagues have it. Penalty minutes, okay. Power play points, okay. Average time on ice, what? And then shots on goal. There's no blocks or hits in this, and you sort of have these three categories that are terrible, right? Yeah, plus minus and penalty minutes and average time on ice. They sort of don't really correlate with each other in a lot of different ways, and it's very difficult to tell you the best and worst value according to these settings. We're gonna try though, and we're gonna do it quick because I don't know how many people actually use these settings. But what I will say in terms of general advice, it would be to punt the penalty minute category because I just don't think it's worth it. You can cover a lot of categories with players that you can win on. You don't need the penalty minutes, so that would be my advice. We're gonna start off with goalies, very similar to the default points league settings because there's no saves as a category. Volume does not matter. Like, you don't want those volume goalies like the Sam Montembeaus and the UC Saroses of the world, but you do want to find good value on these goalies on good teams. You want goalies to have a good save percentage and goals against average and obviously get wins. Those are the three cats. So in terms of my favorite value, I have Anthony Stolars, Ilya Sorokin, Logan Thompson, Mackenzie Blackwood, Freddie Anderson, Jacob Markstrom, Linus Allmark, Karel Vejmelka, Pyotr Kochetkov, and then Joseph Woll if you can throw him on your IR. Blackwood and Markstrom have to be the best value here. No reason why Blackwood should be going as the 15th goalie off the board, even if he's going to miss a few weeks. Markstrom, 21st goalie off the board. Makes no sense. Make sure you target those guys. In terms of the worst value, Dustin Wolf. I know he had some good numbers last year, but it's too pricey. When you're getting Mackenzie Blackwood 80 picks later or Jacob Markstrom 120 picks later, goalies on better teams, it doesn't make too much sense. I also don't like Joey Decort's price, Sam Montembeaus, UC Saros, and Tristan Jarry. Also, this is obvious, but you don't want the Spencer Knights or the Yaroslav Askarovs. No goalies on bad teams. Moving on to forwards, I want to reiterate that there's no hits and blocks in these default category settings, so a player like Vincent Trocheck is going to be overvalued, and we are also punting the penalty minute category. We're not going to be focusing on players with that. We're just going to be focusing on players that can put up goals, assists, plus minus, power play points, shots, and also average time on ice because that is a default setting. This means you want players on power play 1 ideally. Yeah, we're going to be focusing on that, but also we're just going to be focusing in general on players that are overvalued. There are players that are glaringly obvious, regardless of your league settings. They shouldn't be going that high. And then there's also players that are going way too late as well. They're undervalued. So let's dive right into it. The best here is Kaprizov, Jack Hughes, Jack Eichel, Mitch Marner, Matt Boldy, Jesper Bratt, Sebastian Aho, Nico Hischier, Kevin Fiala, Robert Thomas, Nikolai Ehlers, and Brian Rust. All of these guys are just great value. Some of them obvious, like Mitch Marner and Matt Boldy. And also with no positions here, just being forwards, Jack Eichel should not be going this late, 24.1 ADP. Even with positions, if you have positions, he shouldn't be going this late. Kirill Kaprizov going before Philip Forsberg, Brady Tkachuk, William Nylander, even David Pastrnak. I think Kaprizov should be over. And Jack Hughes as well has a lot of upside. Worst value is Nylander, just going ahead of some guys that he shouldn't. Mikko Rantanen, same thing. thing. Macklin Celebrini, 23 ADP, ahead of Jack Eichel. What are we doing? Cole Caulfield, Alex Ovechkin, just too pricey. Tim Stützle, very pricey. Steven Stamkos, what are we doing here, guys? He's on Nashville now, okay? He's moved on from Tampa. He's no longer a point per game player. He could bounce back a bit, but at 42 ADP, makes absolutely no sense. Kirill Marchenko, I'm a big fan, but this ADP is bonkers as well. Brandon Hagel, Connor Bedard, Vincent Trocheck. This league does not count hits, so not going to have an edge. Adam Fantilli, what are we doing? 74 ADP, ahead of Sebastian Aho, right beside Jesper Bratt, ahead of Nico Hischier by 20 picks, ahead of Robert Thomas by 70 picks. Fantilli's not even power play 1, so I just don't understand this at all, no matter your league settings. And then the most glaringly obvious, like, what are we doing here? ADP is Matt Coronado. I don't even want to dedicate time to asking why Matt Coronado's ADP is this high. So yeah, we're just going to leave it at that. For the rest, you have Svechnikov, Kachuk. If you throw him on your IR, that's huge. Velarde, Besser, Matt Barzal going super late. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins going super late, has that power play point to fill that cat, and also some goals, assists, and plus minus time on ice. Valery Nichushkin could be very underrated. Zach Hyman, if you can throw him on your IR. Ken Johnson, Mark Stone, Sean Monahan, and Arturi Lehkonen. For the worst, Kadri and Horvat are way overvalued. Dorofeev is overvalued, to be honest. Brock Nelson is overvalued. Logan Cooley, Timo Meier. Meier's not going to be on power play 1. This league does not count hits either, so doesn't have much to offer. Brad Marchand makes no sense. Alex Laferriere, this league does not count hits. Chris Kreider, too pricey. JJ Peterka, Will Cooley, Marco Casper. Those hit guys will not matter in those leagues. So yeah, like I said, understand your league settings and find value according to your league settings. Finally, when we're talking about defensemen with these default category settings, you don't want to get those guys with incredible peripherals. There's no hits and blocks, so that's why Mackenzie Weegar is terrible value here. But I would say the best is those guys that are going to put up a lot of points and power play points, and obviously some guys that can put up a lot of shots as well. So those best are Bouchard, Sanderson, Lane Hudson, Heiskanen, Harley. I know there's some question with power play 1 deployment with those two. It's hard to say right now. It's sort of a coin toss, but both of them are going at really good value. Then you have Seth Jones, Dougie Hamilton, Morgan Riley. Riley has got to be one of my favorite values here. Shea Theodore, Luke Hughes, Vince Dunn, and Cam Fowler. In terms of the worst, it's going to be some of these guys that are overvalued according to ADP, and also guys that put up a lot of peripherals that won't matter in these leagues. So you have Weegar, you have John Carlson, who's just going way too high regardless of settings. Mike Matheson, again, going super high, makes no sense according to these category settings. Rasmus Anderson, no blocks here, so no reason he should be going this high. Noah Dobson, Brock Faber, not power play 1 guys. Colton Parayko, same thing. Neil Pionk, Darnell Nurse, Gustav Forsling, and Noah Hannafin. Also, all the other peripheral guys that don't put up a lot of points or power play points that I may have missed, they should be on here as well. All right, guys, that's the end of the video. I hope this was helpful. It was sort of difficult to do. I don't know how many people are running these default settings. Very, very interesting settings. Not the biggest fan. Huge discrepancies between the default category and points league settings, and just wild ADPs on here. So yeah, hit that like button if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new to the channel, and I will catch you in the next one.